Welkom bij Women Disrupting Tech. Mijn naam is Dirk-Jan Hupkes en in deze podcast ga ik op ontdekkingsreis in de wereld van vrouwen in de technologiesector. Ik ga in gesprek met vrouwen die in tech werken of oprichter zijn van een tech-startup. Ik ga op zoek naar het antwoord op de vraag hoe zij er wel in geslaagd zijn om succes te hebben. Met andere woorden, hoe zij de technologiesector disrupten. Luister je mee? Hey everyone, this is the first episode I do face-to-face. I interview Faviola Dadis, and Faviola is the founder and Chief Innovation Officer of Neuroreality. Now, Neuroreality creates serious games for virtual reality that help people who have suffered from a stroke or from long COVID to improve their cognitive abilities and to work on their cognitive rehabilitation. And if you think, I don't understand a word what he's saying, don't worry, we've got you covered. The suite of games is called Koji's Quest. In this episode, we will talk about the science behind these games, what it's like to run a startup as a woman, what it's like to pitch for investors, and about the power of gaming. Welcome to Women Disrupting Tech, Faviola Dadis.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to be here.
Good. Well, first question I ask everyone is how you got into your current position.
It's a long story, but I'm going to try and keep it short and succinct for everybody. I come from a very diverse background myself. My father was Egyptian, my mother's German, and I've lived in 9 countries. I was born in the United States, but I grew up here in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, where we're currently conducting this interview. So from a very young age, I always had an entrepreneurial spirit, and traveling the world allowed me to understand that there's not necessarily one product market fit that works for every single country. You have to understand how to communicate your message, not only just in terms of communication from person to person, but communicate the message that your brand wants to convey. And that really, this diverse background that I have both culturally, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the other fields that I've worked in, they really did contribute and lend more towards this. So my idea is to basically tackle problems that are affecting the globe and think about this from a global perspective. So I experienced certain things that were very helpful in my early career. I was the director of marketing and PR for a firm in Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Tokyo, where I took high-end brands from the Western market and helped to transition them to the Asian market. I also worked in geopolitics for a brief amount of time. All of these experiences, and then I don't like to say it, but at this point I've embraced the fact that you can be a woman and you can be whomever you want, be a scientist. I thought people wouldn't take me seriously, but I modeled internationally for about 15, 20 years. And all of those things put together really did help me, as I said, understand about how different cultures operate, how one product may be received completely differently in a specific market as compared to another. You wouldn't market something to a Japanese person in the same way that you would market it to an American individual. So those were all things I learned from that. Then fast forward to Koji's Quest and Neuroreality, Koji's Quest being the software we create. I did a lot of soul searching after a difficult event where my father had passed away. And in so much as people know what they want to do for sure, when I was 8 years old and onwards, I was still writing constantly in journals, I want to be a scientist. I want to be a scientist. So it's something that I always knew. And as impactful events have a way of taking you back to your passions, that was when I really started to get very serious about neuroscience again. Of course, I had been doing my bachelor's degree in psychology and neurobiology at the time, but that was not seriously what I wanted to go on and do. From there, I did a research master's at the Vrije Universiteit here in conjunction with the University of Oxford, where I completed my internships and thesis. And what I noted working at Oxford, because that was a great portion of my research master's was spent there, was that something that I had experienced personally was the same case for the hundreds of patients that I was working with, which is that while they had their physical problems very well dealt with, and when we talked about, when you had the introduction, you said we work with stroke and long COVID patients. We work with a larger group of individuals who have traumatic brain injuries, acquired brain injuries, which constitutes people who have had head trauma, concussions, all of these different types of issues that happen. When you say acquired brain injury, you mean after birth. And I saw that these individuals were struggling to find the care that they needed. There were no solutions available. They would discuss this with their GPs or with their rehabilitation specialists. And as far as they could get was really occupational therapy that wasn't helpful for them, in the sense that it was difficult and tedious and time consuming for them, unmotivating. And I really was curious myself, because I was asked these questions constantly. How is the continuity of care going as well for you? Because I would see patients that were in their acute phase, so just very, very shortly after having a stroke, all the way to patients who were 20 and plus years from having a stroke. So how do we deal with this problem? Why is there no continuity of care? Why aren't individuals being monitored subsequently? Because most of the people that were the 20-year plusers had about maybe, several more, a few more strokes in between, or had developed other neurodevelopmental issues that go along with this. So that was really something that it was like, okay, this is really an important issue. And I'd experienced it with my Oma myself. She lived very far in rural British Columbia, away from Vancouver, and suffered a stroke herself, was complaining about cognitive concerns, and unfortunately was not taken seriously by her doctor, who didn't know that much about that. Any specialist care would have required a 3-hour drive there, 3-hour drive back. She didn't feel comfortable even taking public transportation, and was starting to become isolated from her social group, which was very difficult for someone who's growing older. And I call myself a baby neuroscientist at the time, because I was just learning. And I wish that then I'd had the knowledge that I have now, and that I could have really gone back and done something, what I created at Neuroreality, which is an accessible platform that allows individuals to rehabilitate in a fun, motivating way, but also monitors and tracks their progress, so that you can see if there is really something going wrong and make the program tailor-made to that particular individual's deficits.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, the problem that you're solving is not so much the, let's say, the physical part of the rehabilitation, because that's very well taken care of, but really the let's call it the rewiring of the brain.
Yes, neuroplasticity is what we call, that's our scientific term for reorganization of networks in the brain. And this can happen naturally through learning, but it can also happen as a result of recovery from a traumatic event. And in this case, we approach things from a perspective of active recovery, instead of what is often proposed to patients across the board, oftentimes, not just those with an acquired brain injury, but that you have to accept your new circumstances. What we really want is for individuals to go back and be able to have independence and autonomy in their lives and be productive members of society. If that's not possible, because there are some people that won't recover, and that's a very unfortunate thing, but they can live happier lives, more fulfilling, be less lonely. And there's a lot of evidence to show that even individuals in vegetative states are having actual neuroplasticity that occurs just watching things because their eyes are slightly still open. So the brain, the cortex is registering this, and they have actually examined that neuroplasticity occurs even in those states, extreme states. So the goal is a restorative approach where we utilize this gamified way, and I think we'll get back into that in a little bit, right? In order to give better outcomes for these patients. And when you talk about cognition, I think that's a word that a lot of people know nowadays, but to clarify, we're speaking about things like memory and attention, your visuospatial skills, executive functions, which are also a term maybe not known, but basically encompass higher reasoning. And there are many different things that are also connected to your cognitive functions, such as your feelings of well-being, such as your feelings of depression, or in the opposite, happiness. So there, and then again, a connection, because if you're not feeling well cognitively, then your movements are going to be disturbed too. Say if you don't feel the ability that you can pay attention to cross the street, of course, use it or lose it. You're going to start to then feel that even the physical training that you received doesn't compensate for the fact that you've still lost a huge amount of autonomy and independence in your life. So it's
you actually have to do both. You need to do both, the cognitive and the physical part, to make sure that it's sustainable.
Healthy body, healthy mind, right? So I think that it goes both ways. And I think that that's something that we're learning more and more as neuroscientists and entrepreneurs that are creating these digital health solutions. We need to understand that the approaches that we're taking should be comprehensive, and they should be addressing what the actual end user's problems are, not just what we think the end user's problem is, but discussing that with these individuals themselves and clinicians and experts, and really finding out that cognition and movement are linked, and mood is linked to that, quality of life, all of these elements that cognition itself play a role in.
Okay. So talk to me about, because Coach's Quest is played in VR.
Yes.
Why are gaming and VR so important in the rehabilitation of people?
So firstly, I'll answer why VR is, well, actually, I think the more fun answer is the gaming. So one of the things that I really believe is that of all ages, people of all ages enjoy fun and games. Who doesn't, really? And if you have such difficult paradigms, I don't know if any of our listeners have ever had to undergo rehabilitation. Now I'm talking physical rehabilitation, but I've broken 13 fingers. I play rugby, American football, but let's call it rugby here for everyone. And it's very tedious, it's very difficult, and if they would add a game-like element to it, it becomes much easier, and you become much more motivated. If you add a rewarding element to it, you're also becoming much more motivated. But what I had to do was think about, we have AAA games. They are wonderful, but we're not going to be a AAA game studio as a medtech company. So what can we do? And I thought, really, let's look at the games that have withstood the test of time. What are these, and why have they withstood the test of time? I think that all of our listeners will know the names Tetris or Super Mario, or, for example, Pokemon. I think that these are things that people still relate to. They still play these things, and that was sort of where I took my inspiration from in terms of the gamification aspect. Also, because I was asking my patients, what are you doing instead of having this therapy? And they were playing games like Candy Crush and doing certain things that were repetitive, goal-oriented exercises, unbeknownst to them, although we made that more scientifically rigorous, that were actually helping them, and they found it fun and motivating. So that was that part. And then with virtual reality, there are so many benefits to it. When you're utilizing a computer screen that's not really mimicking the actions that you would take in terms of training or a pencil and paper paradigm in the real world. It's also difficult and not necessarily safe to practice skills that you're not capable or feel comfortable doing again, such as I used the example, crossing the street or going on public transportation. So when you're in virtual reality, you have the opportunity to practice these types of skills in a safe way. And we call this ecological validity. That's a term that means that what you're doing is more likened to the real world setting, which we know computers are not necessarily. If you immerse someone in a VR setup, they don't have distractions from the external world. So they're very focused on what they're doing. And by adding these elements of gamification, reward, feeling that you're in this pleasant environment where you're making more naturalistic movements, this is also easier for elderly populations who might get confused about the keyboard or what buttons they should be pushing. It's a lot easier to utilize virtual reality controllers. You'd be very surprised. I've seen 80-year-olds that have put on the hardware and just been able to understand it, because we're heading into a different generation. Your 60-year-old today is not your 60-year-old that it was, way back when. So the other reason as well why VR is it's extremely sensitive in data capture. It allows for things like body tracking, so other biometrics like body tracking, eye tracking, tracking of limbs and functions that are very important for us to gauge. The accelerometer and the gyroscope help us understand certain movements. And there are, in our game, about 10,000 data points collected every minute. This leads to a very sensitive assessment, because that's the second part of our training is assessment, not just training and retraining these functions. But we are then capable of doing certain things that we know are going to be more or less, let's say, less fallible than a human being and their scoring. Because, of course, if you're going to do something like this with a human being, you're subject to their own personal experience, their own personal reflection upon whatever they're scoring. So these types of setups in virtual reality, they're just giving you a lot of data that is very valuable and very sensitive, because it's not going to be interfered with by human interpretation.
Okay, so basically, as I understand it, this benefits both the patient, who has more fun playing it, has more focus because he's really immersed into the game, but also has a huge benefit for clinicians who just get a whole wealth of data on how the patient or how that person is actually functioning.
Absolutely. And the other last part that I would add is that we conducted a study in which we utilized a 2D version of our game and the virtual reality version of our game in combination with a neuroimaging technique called FNIRS. And what we were able to see is that while both of the games did elicit the effect we wanted, which was, it was an attention game. We wanted to see certain activity in areas of the brain that are associated with that particular type of attention. In VR, what you saw was far more focused activity. And so that also goes to show, along with other literature that's currently peer-reviewed, VR seems to be more powerful and may have a faster effect, a treatment effect on individuals that are recovering.
Okay. I want to switch tracks a bit to Neuroreality as a company, because you founded a startup.
I did.
How has your journey been so far as a startup founder? Because you well, you are a woman, you're a startup founder, you had to pitch for investors, you had to explain this incredibly difficult technology that's still in part early stage, not in a technology point of view, but adoption point of view. How has that journey been?
Like a roller coaster is the best way that I can put it. I think that there are a lot of initiatives towards females in tech, women in STEM. For those that don't know that acronym, it's science, technology, engineering, and math. And despite this, there are still only about 27% of the workforce that are working in STEM that are female. And when you talk about investors, just looked it up that it's gone up an astounding 1% since last year. 1% of females across the world receive funding, specifically angel investments and venture capital funding, in order to expand, scale, create their business. And I'm proud to be one of those individuals. However, it's very difficult. You are dealing with a man's world. And from a perspective of being a female, I can give just even an example where there was a pitch event towards investors, and it was very focused specifically on female empowerment and women in STEM. And on the stage, at the end, when the awardees were announced, the stage was full of, and please excuse me, middle-aged white men. And that's sort of the image that we have in our head of who the CEOs or the C-suite individuals are of a lot of these companies. There was one female standing on that stage in an event that was supposed to be geared towards female investment, which astounded me.
Yeah.
And again, didn't astound me, because it is just sort of the status quo currently, and we're trying to make pushes towards changing that. When I founded Neuroreality, I founded it with a very strange purpose, which was to fund my PhD research. This was a very unique idea I had based on entrepreneurial skills that I had acquired throughout the years, and going through the legal ramifications of how that would work instead of applying for grants in the traditional manner, because I felt that I had a solution to a problem that was a product, not only a research trajectory, and that other individuals would also be able to take this and expand it, because I didn't see that I was creating something solely for brain injury, but that could be scaled to use for ADHD, neurodevelopmental individuals with autism, for example, or people with dementia and Parkinson's. So when you're looking at something that's such a scalable solution, there's a lot of opportunity to sort of branch out. And when I was doing that, I was very lucky to not only be funded and given the, I put my money where my mouth was, to go back to the very beginning, and then we'll fast forward again. I went to this group of investors I had been undergoing due diligence with for a few months, and I said, if I put in 25 grand of my own money, will you match me? And that was the start of the relationship. And from there, creating a minimum viable product, and then having a further investment of 200,000 up till now, where we are, we're going to go for our Series A round. And it's been an incredible journey of ups and downs, as I said. Sometimes you're really comfortable and you think, okay, great, we're doing really well. We've got great traction right now. We're being received well. And then sometimes I'll walk into a room of males where I feel like, am I going to be taken seriously here?
Why is that?
I think that there's a preconceived notion, one, because I look quite young. So there's ageism there as well. Feeling that maybe I might have a lack of expertise. And then secondly, that I don't want to say that I think that I'm extremely beautiful or something of that nature, but I was a model before. And I think that there is unfortunately a stigma associated with beauty and intelligence where you can't be both. Really is that's my personal journey. Every other female will have their own personal journey with why they don't feel that they're taken seriously, or don't have the same voice and power. But I speak about this regularly. I'm very vocal about it. I try and make sure that I keep my voice heard. When someone told me, just briefly, working in a lab, that I was supposed to not be a distraction in the lab, and that had a relationship with my wearing makeup, when all the other females in the lab had no issues with wearing makeup with this particular supervisor. I was astounded. And of course, you do want to prove yourself extra as a woman, extra hard. We push ourselves extra hard because we need to fit in with what our male counterparts they see as being sufficient. And I read something that was really, really interesting study that was conducted by Harvard and Wharton, where they took pitches from men and women, and they had I think several venture capital firms assess these different pitches, and they changed the voices. And so there was no one pitching to them, exact same pitches. They changed the voices on them.
From female to male.
From female to male, and from male to female. And 18% of the pitches of the females were selected, while the rest went to the males, and they were the exact same pitches. So that just already goes to show you that there is a preconceived bias. And the discussion didn't really allude to any solutions in the near future, except for what I was talking about, which is promoting and, making this, awareness. But aside from that, like I said, I think every woman will have her own journey about how she's going to have to tackle and infiltrate this old boys network of individuals that don't necessarily understand or appreciate that females have a lot to add, especially considering most products are designed and made for men. I mean, think about with COVID, with the masks, right?
Yeah.
These are designed for men. The hazmat suits were designed for men, by men. And
if you have a man designing a product, he will think of himself first, and especially with a mask.
And on construction site, you have the hard hats that people wear. These are all safety concerns, and unfortunately, these are things that are designed specifically for men. If you're a woman, you should use the children's version, is often what's recommended. It's pretty crazy. It's really, really crazy. And I'm not saying.
How do you do this? How do you deal with this in terms of the composition of your own team? Because as I understand it, the Neuroreality is not really. There's not really a lot of men in there.
No, initially we had a few more. At the moment, we are primarily, we're 80% female, and I don't know if this is, it's both by choice and by coincidence. I feel that when we interview someone, I look at every candidate equally. And a lot of women are really passionate and coming up in this field because we know we have to be that extra level of passionate in order to do this. So the talent that I have found around me, like I said, it was sort of by mistake and also by design, has been a lot of females who are extraordinary researchers or business developers working in marketing. Our CEO, Sandy, she's also female, obviously. This is something that for me was important to show that I actually put my money where my mouth is, really, again. I'm a person of action. And if I'm going to say that we need to promote women in STEM, I should promote women in STEM. So that that's been the part of design, but the part of coincidence has been that we've just had some amazing, amazing women who have come into the company and created so much value.
Mm-hmm. So it is actually possible to have that
To infiltrate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think especially in startups and scale ups, you'll see a lot more of this.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in larger companies like Accenture or Deloitte, that's maybe a little bit harder to move up the ladder as a female.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, I'm very happy that we have a diverse team, both culturally and in terms of gender. There are people from all over the world on our team. Our primary language in a Dutch company is English because of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as we continue to grow, we also have helped the men in our organization understand what value the women in our in our company Neuroreality bring.
Okay. So I want to switch tracks again a bit, looking backward and then forward into your life. You've had quite a journey with Neuroreality, and before that with your background in neuroscience and modeling and marketing. If there was one advice you would give your younger self looking back, what would it be and why?
Okay, so we'll start with a personal tidbit of information. I have autism, and so that makes my brain wired differently. It doesn't make me any better, it doesn't make me any worse. It just means that my brain functions differently. If I had realized that nerds were going to be cool later on, and that there was a reason for the way that my brain was functioning differently and why I felt so misunderstood by my peers and was teased so much, I'd go back and say to myself, don't be so hard on yourself, because it's going to be okay. And all of these individuals who are chanting at you that you're a nerd and that all you do is study, and that they're going to be proud of you one day. And it doesn't matter actually if they are, but you have to be proud of yourself. So that's what I would say to my. This is the same thing actually that I should still be saying to myself, because it's difficult. You can give that piece of advice, and I would love to go back and nurture that young lady in a different way for not being such a perfectionist.
Okay. And how would you approach that?
I think in a gentle and compassionate way. I would identify it. It was identified. I was put in a gifted program from a very early age. I skipped 2 years, and it was something that was great for me in terms of challenge and thinking and growth intellectually. But I think I would be softer on myself and surround myself with people that didn't expect so much from me, because it was always expected that I performed in a certain capacity. Yeah. I think that I would
Does that come with the territory of being really talented?
I don't think that I would call myself really talented, because I'm not. I think that would sound very conceited. I'd say that I have a lot of knowledge and information about many different things. So I do think, that in my life coming up, there's been a lot of people who have been also, when I really look deep down at it, a lot of the people that teased me and that were uncomfortable with me and with the big ideas that I had were often jealous. That's something that we don't really take into account until someone, usually one of your friends or family members, points out to you, hey, didn't you realize actually this person is jealous of you? But I mean, I would just treat myself with a lot more compassion instead of being so strict on myself. That's the same thing that I'm trying to learn to do now. It's I'm a lifelong learner, and this is still a work in progress. On top of that, 8 years ago, I was diagnosed with something else, but I think that your next question is going to be along the lines of what I would write to or tell my future self.
Well, yes.
Right?
Yes.
So we said we're going to go back in the past and into the future. So I sort of gathered that that was where we were heading. I still have autism. It's something that I was born with.
Mhm.
There is no cure for autism, and I don't really wish that there is one. There's a lot of challenges I face, a lot of adversity. I've gone through a lot of abuse in my life, physically, emotionally, sexually, mentally. And I also have a very severe neurological disability. And this basically lands me in the hospital maybe 50% of the month. And for 8 years, I've been contending with this, yet I'm doing a dual PhD. I went to Oxford. I started a company against all odds when I was living in my car and in my closet because I had exhausted all of my funds at that point through my education, actually, and that modeling paid for my education. So it was something that I would like to say to me, if there's something I would like to say to my future self, it's, hey, you are here still and you went through all of that and you're still standing. You are tenacious, and no matter how many times you have to rebuild your life, you're going to do it. And you did do it. Think back on who you are, remind yourself who you are. Sometimes I do that. I look in the mirror and I say, don't forget who you are. Don't forget where you came from. Because
that's very powerful, right?
It is, because it's very difficult. I'm very hard on myself, as I said, and it's very difficult to remind yourself of any accolades. A lot of the time, people also put me down for accolades that I receive. Again, maybe towards the jealousy issue, but maybe they don't think that I'm deserving of them. That's fine. I work very, very hard for what I do, but I'm often not proud of myself, which is a shame. And
even though you get results,
even though I get great results, even though I win a lot of awards, even though I sat on the Forbes Council for Women in STEM, I was the representative for Europe, and I'm still doing so many different things to try and promote other individuals to feel like they can embrace their own level of uniqueness without feeling that they're out of place. For me, that's what being an inspiration means. Not to highlight my own goals, my own accolades, etc., and achievements, but to make sure that other people realize that they're unique. So in order to do that, I have to lead by example sometimes, even on my roughest days when I'm not feeling good, and look in the mirror, and sometimes through tears, say, do not forget where you came from. Don't forget who you are. You have overcome so much. You keep going. So that's, in my future self, in my present self as well. That's always something that I think is very important. And I would also tell my future self, take it easy. Not everything has to happen immediately. It doesn't have to happen tomorrow. Are you pissed off when someone doesn't take time to get back to an email within one day? No, not really. So why is it so important for you to do the exact same thing? Those types of things that you learn along the way. If I had known what I do now, my future self needs to put and prioritize not only just work, but also understand I'm a unique individual. I have a disability. I also take a proactive approach towards that, just like what we do with Koji's Quest, right? We're all about restorative approaches instead of acceptance. There are parts of this that I have to deal with acceptance. And a lot of part of it too is don't be so hard on yourself or think that you're incompetent because you have a disability, and you have actually multiple disabilities. but that doesn't change anything about what you're capable of, the quality or caliber of your work, or what you can do in terms of achieving your goals.
That sounds like a beautiful closing.
Well, it was my pleasure to be here with you, DJ.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Favi. If people want to learn more about Neuroreality, Koji's Quest, or about yourself, where can they go?
So first and foremost, I would say that you just check out my website. Excuse me. Check out our website, which is www.neuro-reality.com. Koji's Quest is something that we're always happy to talk to individuals about, and you can reach out to us via our contact form on the website, and we're happy to tell you more about how you can utilize this in your own clinic or as a patient where it's available. If you want to contact me, I would suggest to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm also active on multiple social media platforms where I'm a science communicator. I try to make science accessible for individuals. And yeah, to sort of, I guess, round it off with the whole juxtaposition between intelligence and beauty, my handle on Instagram is Neuroscience Barbie. And yeah, I embraced it at a certain point, if enough people are going to push at you and tease you for being something,
but you
embrace it,
Yeah.
So that's another place where you can find information that might be very difficult to understand in terms of science. And I try to make it very accessible to people, but professionally speaking, please reach out to me on LinkedIn, obviously.
Dankjewel voor het luisteren. Ik hoop dat je het interessant vond. Je kunt deze en andere afleveringen van Women Disrupting Tech vinden op Apple, Google, Spotify en Anchor. En daar kun je natuurlijk ook op de podcast abonneren. Bovendien vind je daar de links naar de website en social media profielen van mijn gasten. Heb je feedback of suggesties, bijvoorbeeld gasten die ik echt zou moeten interviewen? Laat het me weten via dirkjan@truestorycompany.nl. Tot de volgende aflevering.